Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, it's the Friday show, and I'm Sam Sachs, America's 7th hottest newsman. Yeah, I moved up in the rankings after Lou Dobbs died. Rest in peace, you sexy bastard. During the final night of the Republican National Convention, Donald Trump reminded everyone why he is still eminently beatable this election. If only Democrats could field a candidate who can talk in complete sentences. Trump delivered the longest televised convention nomination acceptance speech in U.S. history. He droned on for 92 minutes, breaking the previous record set also by him at the 2020 convention, which broke a record also set by Trump during his speech at the 2016 RNC. Dude loves to talk about himself. Trump had the RNC audience enraptured with his every move all week, coming off the assassination attempt against him last Saturday. When he was in the family box watching other speakers during the convention, audience members were turned around staring at him. Some even began wearing a bandage on their ear to mimic the former president. But by the end of the convention and his marathon speech on Thursday night, he had lost the audience. He bored them to death. This is from Politico. Quote, "By the end, the crowd was definitely feeling antsy. Trump went on to speak for 40 more minutes after his family exited their private box, which presumably was a signal of the speech's planned end. He went off the cuff, ignoring prepared remarks on the teleprompter and sounding very similar to how he normally does at his political rallies. Audience members started checking their phones, standing in the aisles to stretch their legs, and some even ended up falling asleep." When Trump did have the audience's attention, he stuck to his promise of carrying out the largest deportation raids in American history if elected. A staggering 15 to 20 million people could be ripped from their communities by armed agents and put into camps and eventually planes and flown out of the country, a task that would require a scale of state violence that hasn't been seen in this country since the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, or Jim Crow after the Civil War. When we talk about fascism and whether or not it can happen here, the state moving to deport 15 million people is the it happening. Ultimately, Trump made a fool of all the pundits who, ahead of the speech, speculated that he was a changed man after nearly getting shot, that he would push for national unity or something. Instead, Trump ranted about Hannibal Lecter and his 10-year friendship with Kid Rock, and he called for the president of the United Auto Workers, Sean Fain, to be fired, letting the mask slip on whatever populist appeal Republicans were hoping to project during the convention. The meandering and at times incoherent speech would have raised questions about Trump's own cognitive abilities to run for president. He is 78 after all, if not for the fact that his opponent consistently performs even worse in public speaking events. Trump's speech was so bad that it might actually be a problem for Democrats. That's because the latest reporting out of the White House ahead of the speech was that Biden had finally accepted that he is not the Democrats' best option to beat Trump in November. This was from CNN, quote, "More than 24 sources familiar with the dynamics inside the West Wing and campaign said there is now widespread acceptance that Biden remaining in the 2024 race is wholly untenable. Everyone is saying it privately, one senior Democrat said, people see and feel the walls closing in. There were even reports that Biden could, as soon as this weekend, deliver a major address in which he announces he's not running for re-election. But Trump's speech Thursday may have inspired Biden to stay in the race, thinking he can still win it. Biden campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon said in a statement after the RNC concluded, quote, "The stakes have never been higher. The choice has never been more clear. President Biden is more determined than ever to defeat Donald Trump and his Project 2025 agenda in November." Well, that's fucking great. You know, I don't think I've ever seen both parties more determined to lose an election. What a time to be alive. A stunning development in Israel's war on Gaza. The city of Tel Aviv was attacked by a drone early Friday morning, killing one person and injuring 10 others. Immediately afterward, Houthi rebels in Yemen claimed responsibility for it. And if true, it would mark the first time that Houthis evaded Israeli air defense systems in one of its attacks, which have been ongoing as retaliation against Israel's genocide in Gaza. In a statement, the Houthi military said it deployed a new type of drone capable of getting around Israeli countermeasures. This is from the Washington Post. Quote, "The Yemeni group has previously claimed drone attacks on the southern Israeli city of Eilat, roughly 1,000 miles from northern Yemen. But the strike on Tel Aviv, if confirmed, appears to represent an increase in the Houthis' capability and reach." Houthi said that they would continue with similar attacks against Israel and have a list of targets. The Tel Aviv strike occurred fairly close to the U.S. Embassy. It's unclear if that was one of those targets. The U.S. military has been bombing Houthi military capabilities for months, ever since the group began disrupting ship commerce in the Red Sea to retaliate against Israel's war in Gaza. The attack on Tel Aviv was praised by Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has also been trading airstrikes with the Israeli military since the latest invasion of Gaza began last October. This is from Al Jazeera. Quote, "Lebanon's Hezbollah armed group has called a deadly drone attack on Tel Aviv that had been claimed by Yemen's Houthi rebels as a triumph for the oppression of the Palestinian people and their fighters. The group said the fight will not stop until the aggression and the siege of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip is stopped." The situation in Gaza is growing even more dire. The health ministry reported that it has detected the virus that causes polio in sewage water, which raises the risk of an outbreak, as if the situation couldn't get any worse for the more than 2 million Palestinians living under an Israeli siege. In light of the findings, the ministry called for, quote, "an immediate halt to the Israeli aggression, providing usable water, repairing sewage lines, and ending population crowding of places of displacement." Which, of course, Israel won't do, which is why it's up to the Houthis and Hezbollah to do what no other country in the West is willing to, which is make Israel pay for the mass war crimes it's committing. In the absence of any credible form of international law, what exactly are the other options? Student debtors are calling on President Biden to issue an immediate suspension of loan repayments after the federal courts again tore down a part of his relief plan. This week, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals temporarily blocked one of the administration's major student loan repayment initiatives, known as the SAVE program. Under it, debtors submit financial information to the Department of Education, such as their income and how much they spend on necessities like housing. And based on that, the department lowers their monthly loan payments to make them more affordable. More than 8 million people are enrolled in the program, and more than 4 million had their monthly payments lowered to just zero. But that's all in jeopardy now following the court's decision, which was handed down at the behest of a coalition of right-wing state attorneys general who sued to block the program, claiming that Congress didn't give power to the Department of Education to do such a thing. It did, actually. And that such relief deprives state loan operators of revenue. Oh no. Won't someone think of the loan servicers? The administration is appealing the decision, and in all likelihood, this matter will go to the Supreme Court, which has already struck down President Biden's efforts to provide broad-based student loan relief. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona said that there will be, quote, devastating consequences for millions of borrowers as a result of the Eighth Circuit's ruling. The court here is essentially stealing money from 8 million people. That's why student debt advocacy groups are calling for an immediate suspension of repayment, as was done during the pandemic, to ensure folks don't suffer any needless financial hardship from the ruling. Through a variety of methods, the administration has managed to lower the debt burden by about $168 billion for more than 4.7 million borrowers around the U.S., which sounds like a lot and is a figure often touted by the White House. But that's really only about 10% of student loan debt holders in the country. More than 42 million in total have outstanding debt. And the $168 billion forgiven is less than 10% of the more than $1.7 trillion of outstanding student loans out there. So yeah, this is a massive problem that the administration is only just scratching the surface of. And President Biden's insistence on doing student loan forgiveness through complex, means-tested programs that borrowers have to apply for leave the entire effort more vulnerable to right-wing judicial sabotage, which can stop the bureaucracy before relief is provided. Instead, what Biden ought to do is instruct his education department to just zero out everybody's loan balance and dare the courts to somehow claw the money back, which they can't do because they don't have an army or anything. Every Friday, we do our little part to advance the class war by naming and shaming the wealthiest assholes around. So, let's get to it. This week's rich dick is Hulk Hogan. That's right, the iconic professional wrestler did his shtick at the RNC this week where he endorsed Donald Trump for president. Take a look.
When they took a shot at my hero and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again.
Okay, that's enough, Terry. That's enough. If anyone was surprised to see Hogan at the RNC, it's because they simply don't know how big of a scumbag he really is. Now, I'm not an expert on the guy or anything, but I've been following Hogan for a long time. In fact, I was at the Bash at the Beach in Daytona back in 1996 when Hogan first made his heel turn and joined the NWO in a triple tag team match. That's 11-year-old Sam right there in the front row with my mom. But what 11-year-old Sam didn't realize at the time is Hogan did a heel turn long before then. He's actually one of the main reasons why Vince McMahon was able to make a fortune off the broken bodies of men and women who wrestled for him. It's all because Hogan killed a union drive at the WWF back in the 1980s. That's all according to Jesse the Body Ventura, who's recounted the story several times since then. Ahead of WrestleMania 2, back in 1986, Ventura convened an organizing meeting with the rest of the wrestlers and told them that they shouldn't go out to the ring until they're guaranteed union recognition. Here's what happened next, according to Ventura, who told the story on the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast back in 2016.
The next night I got a call from Vince, who basically threatened to fire me if I ever brought it up again, and read me the riot act. Well, then when I sued Vince, we had to depose him. And on the way out, I told my lawyer the story. And in deposition, you can bring up anything. And I said, if you can, David, find out who ratted me. I said, find out who ratted me that day, because it was one of the boys, because there were no agents there. Yeah. And so we got in there, Vince, and my attorney was great. He says, Mr. McMahon, he said, has there ever been a union in wrestling? Vince, no. Anyone ever try to form one? Vince sat a minute, says, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I think Jesse Ventura spouted his mouth off about it once years ago. And my attorney goes, well, how do you know that? Did you hear him? No. Well, how did you know he spouted his mouth? He didn't even hesitate. Hulk Hogan told me. I was sitting in the chair and at a deposition.
You didn't sell it.
Well, at a deposition, you can't talk.
Right.
And you got to be, I was there. It was like someone punched me in the face. This was my friend. And I thought, Hogan betrayed me. Hogan called Vince and ratted me, was an office stooge. In my day, that's what they were called. That was a lowlife, an office, somebody who reports to the office in the old days, and it stunned me.
Ventura went on to note how Hogan was making more money than all the other wrestlers combined at the time, which explains why he killed the union. Decades later, Hogan would reprise his role as a stooge for billionaires after Gawker published an embarrassing story about an affair he had, including a sex tape. Hogan teamed up with libertarian billionaire Peter Thiel in a lawsuit against the outlet. The suit was funded entirely by Thiel, who had long had a grudge against Gawker, which had also published embarrassing stories about him. Ultimately, Thiel and Hogan's lawsuit succeeded, forcing Gawker to go bankrupt and shut down in one of the more consequential media trials in history. Out of that trial, though, we did learn that Hogan is also a filthy racist. Recordings that were submitted into evidence and later released to the public featured Hogan back in 2007 going on a racist tirade, firing off the N-word over and over again, all because he was upset that his daughter was sleeping with a black man. Hogan got fired at WWE over it. Maybe he should have had a union. Hogan, though, would later be reinstated. So ultimately, we've got a racist who hates unions and who teams up with billionaires to crush news sites he doesn't like. So of course Hulk Hogan was right at home at the Republican National Convention. He's a rich dick, just like the rest of them. Okay, friends, the show ends this morning with a sunrise from Virginia. It was sent in by Mike in Standardsville. Enjoy. Thank you, Mike. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. Until then, we'll be right here. See you next week.